If you are a new player to the game Palia, you probably are wondering, how do you make the most money the quickest? Because you start the game incredibly poor and there are so many expensive things that you want and need to buy. So, to answer this question, I spent the entire day conducting an experiment comparing hunting and fishing and bug catching and foraging to see which would be the most profitable. Now keep in mind that the values of the items may be nerfed or buffed at a later date. So, which activity do you think will be the most profitable? Let's find out. First up is foraging. I actually completed this 30-minute foraging experiment twice. First, focusing on the coral shores area of Bahari Bay, and then opening up a broader foraging grounds to include the central and southern shore areas of the bay, including Lighthouse Lagoon and Beachcomber Cove. I chose to forage in the beach areas of Bahari Bay because that's where you find oysters, which you can open and find oyster meat and various pearls. The beach area also offers shells and coral as well as a plethora of crabs, but since crab catching requires smoke bombs, I saved them for the bug catching experiment. The nice thing about foraging is that it doesn't require any tools or supplies like arrows, smoke bombs, or bait, so it's very beginner friendly and surprisingly profitable. Here are some foraging tips. First, search the beach areas in the nighttime, as the glowing shells, oysters, and coral are easier to see. When you are searching in deeper waters, listen for the sounds of oysters and shells. This is what the oysters sound like, and then the shells. If you don't see anything, don't be afraid to climb up the rocks and scout up high, as you'll often see something that you missed or that just spawned. It definitely helped to enlarge my foraging area to all of the beaches in Bahari Bay due to the slow spawn rate of the oysters. There is a tunnel you can use to easily cross between Coral Shores and Lighthouse Lagoon. If there are others foraging in the same area, you might want to change your plans and come back later. During my first experiment, this one player was clearly oyster hunting, and this was honestly the first time I wished Palia had a bit of PvP so I could pop him in the face with a shotty and get on with my beachcombing. Once the 30 minutes was up, I fast traveled home to the shipping bin. After opening all the oysters, because they're worth more opened than unopened, my first trip yielded 1,469 gold. And my second trip, 2,506 gold. So together, those averaged to 1,988 gold in 30 minutes and about 4,000 gold in an hour. Not too shabby. Next is hunting. For this challenge, I used only my standard bow and crafted about 100 standard arrows. Keep in mind that standard arrows will take down a Sernuk, that's the deer-like creatures in Palia, in one hit, but it will take 2 arrows, 2 hits, and a bit of tracking the wounded creatures if you're using makeshift arrows. So the standard arrows are ideal, and you really don't need anything more powerful. They're kind of overkill, and you will have access to the standard arrows fairly early on in the game. Whispering Banks and Fisherman's Lagoon both have pretty dense Sernuk populations, so this is where I chose to hunt. As with the foraging, there were other players who were hunting in the vicinity, but I had no problem finding a steady supply of Sernuk compared to the oyster shells and coral. So I do wonder if the devs will nerf the spawn rate of the Sernuk eventually. Hunting is one of the most enjoyable ways to make money, as taking down the Sernuk is quite satisfying. You can also hunt the little squirrel-like creatures called chappas, but they're a bit tougher to hit because of their size and they're not as plentiful, at least currently. With the standard arrows, it's very easy to take down a Sernuk and you'll receive meat, hide, and sometimes antlers. If the sernich is close, aiming for the body makes the kill pretty much a sure bet. But when farther away, I like to aim for the head so that in case you're too low, you can hopefully at least hit the body. Also, keep in mind that the farther you are from the target, the higher you need to aim to allow the arrow to arch and then fall over the long distance. After a while, you'll get the hang of it and make quick work of clearing the grassland of the robust deer population. After 30 minutes, I was able to sell the sernich meat, hide, and antlers for 4,265 gold, over double the rate of what I got from foraging. Maybe I'm just really bad at foraging or really good at hunting, or I was just lucky, I don't know, but I was totally impressed with how much I got from this. On to fishing. I opted to fish as a noob with the standard rod and without bait because that's kind of hard to come by as a beginner to get the worms, though I did craft a rod health booster to strengthen the rod. I began fishing in the Whispering Banks and Fisherman's Lagoon areas, but after I realized just how slow and low value fishing was, I trekked all over Akilima and Bahari Bay testing out various fishing spots. Whispering Banks netted me a couple rainbow trout, and Bahari Bay was where I caught the barracuda, but even star quality fish weren't of impressive value considering the time involved and the likelihood that I catch something rare. A few tips for fishing include aiming for the areas that you see the bubbles and ripples in the water, as this is where you will catch the star quality fish. But otherwise, you can fish anywhere that the game will let you. Currently, the game has no controller support, so if your mouse has a low DPI like mine does, try moving it to the top of your mouse pad as soon as your rod is in the water so that you'll have plenty of room for the fishing minigame because you will be pulling that mouse toward you. Listen for the bobber to get some nibbles, and then when you hear kind of a chimey sound, left click and begin reeling in. However, watch the bobber and react accordingly with your mouse to keep the bobber from going outside the green brackets. If the brackets turn yellow or red, stop reeling until you move your mouse and the brackets turn green again. Then you can continue reeling. If other players near you applaud with the applause emote while you are fishing, you will see a fishing icon appear in the top left, and this will make your fish easier to reel in. Whenever I see someone fishing, I like to help them by giving them some applause if I can. After 30 minutes, I deposited my fish into the shipping bin and was quite disappointed and shocked at the meager 826 gold. Although I enjoyed fishing and I found it relaxing, it clearly isn't very profitable, at least with the standard rod and no bait. I'm curious to see how the rod, bobber, and bait upgrades will affect profitability of fishing. Finally, we have bug catching. For the bug and critter catching, I crafted about 100 regular smoke bombs and used the default belt tool. I began in the Whispering Banks and Fisherman's Lagoon area, but wandered all over both maps during this half hour. All you have to do for bug catching is whap the bug by throwing a smoke bomb. The grasshoppers can be a bit tricky, and the star quality insects seem to take several smoke bombs, but it's otherwise pretty simple and straightforward, and you can find bugs everywhere. If you plan on doing a lot of bug catching, my advice is to empty out as much of your backpack as you can beforehand. I was very surprised at how quickly the bugs consumed my bag space, and I had 4 rows in my bag. I included crabs and snails in this experiment since you collect them with smoke bombs the same as hopping and flying critters. Upon finishing the 30 minutes, I sold everything for 1,166 gold. I really didn't expect bug catching to be more profitable than fishing, but it was, at least for me. So which of the 4 methods is the best way for beginners to make money in Palia? If you watched the video up until this point, you already know the answer, but for everyone else, let me go ahead and run down the tallies. Thanks to me being a dork, I have this handy dandy little chart for you to look at, and you can see that hunting wins by a landslide. Hunting the sernuk netted me 42.65 in 30 minutes. Foraging? About half that much, 1988 gold. The bug catching was only 1166, and then fishing came in last at 826. Now keep in mind that was not using bait for the fishing, and for the bug catching, that was just the belt that I started the game with. But foraging, I didn't need any supplies for, so that was free. And for the hunting, I had the standard bow and the standard arrows. So you do have to take into account the materials you have to use to craft your standard arrows, but that actually is pretty minimal, and it still does not negate that huge margin that you have for the hunting compared to the other methods. Unless they really nerf the hunting and the spawn rate of the sernuk, it is the clear winner if you want to make money fast in Palia currently. And the other methods, I mean, they're great because foraging takes no materials, and maybe you want to do a combination of hunting and foraging, especially if there are other people that are foraging or hunting. You can kind of rotate around and just find what works for you. But I'm just giving you the facts. That's what I found in my experiment of several hours today. And I hope that you have found this helpful. If you have any other tips for making money in Palia, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear them. And if you found this video helpful, please smash that thumbs up and consider subscribing to this old lady's channel. Thanks for watching.